Doing that? I'm very glad. All right, so this is AP Lit, and we're just reviewing chapters 19 through 23. You can talk about anything you want to, but I have a few. On Monday I was just telling you it's really helpful to name the chapters, like 20, King and the Duke take over the raft. 19 was they meet the king and the duke. And there's some other interesting things that happen, but we can really talk about anything. There's some highlights of the Sherburne Boggs thing is something you can use later when you write about it. That's really important. The Royal Nonsuch, that's really important to the plot of the story. Just the things that Huck and Jim do for each other, particularly Jim with Huck, helping him. Jim's story about his daughter, question number 11. Elizabeth. Number 12, the story we talked about, the camp meeting. So the Royal Nonsuch, Sherburne and Boggs, the camp meeting, these are just things we'll refer to. So the backside of this, a lot to do about violence and sentimentalism and making some connections. So when you haven't had a chance to talk lately, where you're, anything you want to look at, you can look at your questions you want to say about this section, any of those subjects I mentioned.
I think it was interesting how the king and the duke like when they went to the church, how they kind of lied. I mean, I guess they were always lying, but how they said they were gonna convert other pirates just so they could get money, which shows kind of how selfish and greedy they are. They're willing to lie inside a church to.
It was a camp meeting, which was outside, but it was a church event. Yeah, you're right. Well, I will call that the camp meeting because that's usually what. Can I ask you though? You're right, but is there anything? I mean, not that you look on the bright side, but is there anything almost admirable? I don't want to say it that way, but about the king's ability to fool people. It's not that we admire it, but we do have to. He's really good at what he does. How is he able to do that? How is he able to fool those people? And he just scams them.
Through his emotions, the way he reacts.
Right, but not only his emotions, but their emotions.
Yeah.
So what is it? What does he say? Or how is he able to get them kind of emotionally bought into his story?
Doesn't he go up in front of all of them?
Yes.
And kind of get them, I guess, excited.
Yeah, and so what is their I think it's a good thing to describe what makes people gullible. Like in their case, why are they so gullible? Why do they just automatically, without any credentials, anything, they could believe this guy? And you don't have to answer it if somebody else wants. But do you have any thoughts about that?
Was he did he say he was converted right there in the church,
Yeah.
at the meeting? So maybe that's kind of convincing, or makes him think oh, he's gonna want to go out and share the gospel.
Because very good. That's what I was getting at. Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say she alluded to he was just very emotional, and he was talking about how he used to be a pirate, but now he's reformed, and now the words of God are working in him, and they compelled him to go back to the Indian Ocean and now minister to those people.
So he was telling them everything they really wanted to hear, and I don't think we have to be gullible as Christians. In fact, most of the churches I've ever been a part of, if you come to the church asking for money, that's what some people will do because churches do like to help people. I've been sort of surprised that there's been a real skepticism. The church usually, they just don't do that for everybody. They just don't dole out money to people just because you have a sad story. And I think there's something wise about that because they could be scamming, but I think we should help people like that. But anyway, they're very gullible because I think they want to hear it. Julia, do you remember the thing called? You can talk about anything you want to, but the Royal Nonsuch, Sherbert and Boggs, those are a couple of other things that showed up in these chapters.
Yeah, wasn't Bog the one that was like running through the streets?
Yeah,
kind
he
of?
was the drunk guy,
Okay.
yeah,
Um,
and Sherburne was the guy that shot him.
okay. Well, I thought it was kind of interesting how those things heighten so fast. And, I don't know, I guess you could see like,
The thing I think is interesting about that is, I kind of admire Sherburne. You know, he's the kind of guy, listen, he's so calm, he's so cool. Don't talk to me that way. He's not emotional, he's just not, if you don't get out of town by 1 o'clock, you know, I'm gonna kill you. And it's almost like, wow, that's pretty impressive. But why am I impressed with that? I mean, it's like, this guy doesn't take anything off anybody. Is that really impressive? Is that really something we should admire? I mean, should he have shot an unarmed drunk man in the middle of the street?
I would say no, because he wasn't harming anybody.
No, he
but,
wasn't.
I mean, in a way, I guess that is kind of admirable if somebody has like the confidence to be able to control an audience and like be able to, you know.
And I agree with you. I feel bad admiring the guy, but don't you kind of like the movies where the guy just doesn't take anything off anybody, and you don't mess with him, he's cool and calm about it, but at the same time, the guy's a murderer. And there's one other thing we found about him, and Will, you remember when the gang or the mob came to arrest him or they weren't going to arrest him, they were going to lynch him, and he's able to hold him off, just one guy with a shotgun. What's behind all that? There's some sort of criticism there of people. I mean, how was he able to do that? How could one guy with a shotgun hold off 200 people, and they walked away?
So, I don't really understand what you're asking.
Okay, I'm just saying, how do you explain the fact that these 200 people couldn't overcome one guy with a shotgun?
Oh, he was kind of just like really confident with it, and he was like, I mean, he was like intimidating, I guess, because I mean he was armed, so I mean not many people will run at somebody with a gun, and it's kind of just one of those things. It's kind of like a barrier. I don't know. I mean,
Yeah, and remember what he said to them? He said, the idea of you lynching anybody, it's amusing, because you're brave, talking to the crowd, he says, you're brave enough to tar and feather poor friendless cast out women that come along here. Did that make you think you were good enough to lay your hands on a man? Talking about himself. While a man's safe in hands of 10,000 of your kind, as long as it's daytime and you're not behind him. The average man's a coward. In the South, all by himself, one man has stopped a stage full of men in the daytime and robbed the lot. Why don't your juries hang murderers because they're afraid of man's friends who will shoot them in the back in the dark, and it's just that what they would do. What's this criticism that he's giving to these people? What's going on there? Caroline?
He's saying that in the dark people are a lot braver because they're hidden in the darkness.
Yeah.
And it's a
Or
lot.
put a hood over your head, a sheet, you know, of course references to maybe the KKK or something.
And also, what he's saying about people fearing hanging murderers for the fear of friends and retribution is that it's not necessarily just the one person that you're afraid of, but the community. If the community doesn't like what's going on, then the community could lash back out. But that also it's a lot easier to see truth and what's right during the daytime
And what's his criticism, John, of mobs? Like, that's a mob he's talking about. Not really a mob, hardly a mob, but still all the people at the camp meeting. That's a bunch of people, yet one man was able to fool all these people. Here's one man who's able to cower an entire mob. What's he saying about mobs? Groups of people that act kind of as one.
He's saying that for the groups, that they don't like really have a leader, or they don't have like a bug, or someone leading them, then they really don't know what to do. Like
Okay.
when the mob was at his porch, and he kind of acted as their leader. He said one time he was saying how
Now, when is this?
when the mob was gonna lynch him,
Right.
and then he was saying that they wouldn't do it because he was
Sure.
kind of acting as like their own leader, so they didn't really know who to follow, so they didn't follow through with the action.
And what's the psychology of a mob? Like, when you're with a whole bunch of people, yeah.
Like if someone has like an idea to go do something, then like other people will get that same idea, and it's not always like a good thing. And just like how they were going to just go kill him like it was nothing. And then he like made a speech, and they were like, oh well, it's not a good thing that we're all going after him to kill him.
Yeah, the law ought to take care of that, but they don't trust the law and they're afraid, so they get together in a mob at night with the hood over their face so that they can do what should have been done in the bright daylight with justice. They do at night. That's part of the problem. Noah, can you talk about the royal nunsuch? Remember that? That's what it's called from this point on. It's one of the scams that the Duke and the King do.
That was like the play that the two king put on, and it was, I think they only like allowed the fans to see it, and it was a really bad play. And at first, the first people who saw the play didn't really like it, but they didn't want to really dominate the rest of the citizens in the town. So they started spreading the word that the play was actually good, so the neighbors that they're the ones that saw it.
That's 2 nights in a row that happens. What happens the third night?
Third night, townspeople were gonna throw the rotten fruit and the dead cats at them. But the king and the duke like knew that was gonna happen, so then they like kind of know the play, but they ran away.
So, isn't that another example? You just can't, hate to admit it, but you kind of admire the Duke and the King. They were able to outsmart another mob. That's another mob. They had come to probably more than throw things at them. They were going to lynch them. And that's just a broad term for any kind of murder that might be committed. But you kind of admire the fact they were smarter than the mob. So they didn't even show up to the royal nunsuch. Do you remember what the royal nunsuch consisted of? Because they tried the play one night and nobody came, so they said, ladies and children not admitted. Now, what was the psychology behind that? Like the first night it was just open, but it was terrible. Or they were going, but then ladies and children not admitted. Why would they say that?
To make it seem like more exclusive, so you could
Yeah, maybe, sexual content or something. They made it sound like only men, this is for men only, not for women and children. And so they show up, but do you remember what it consisted of? Like this, they got a big crowd time. Anybody remember what actually happened? Maddie, do you remember? What the show was lasted about 30 seconds to a minute, and it was over.
Didn't they paint each other?
Well, the king is the one who got painted, so he gets out on stage completely without any clothes on. He's a large man, probably not a pretty sight. They painted stripes around him. He jumps around on stage like an animal, and he goes off, and then the Duke, in this very sophisticated voice, says, "That is the show for tonight. Please ask your name." He's playing it out, and then he knows their psychology is that the second night, these guys don't want to be considered fools for having been fooled, so they invite the rest of the town so that everybody can be a fool. And then at the end, the Duke and the King don't show up. I just have to admire that. I mean, it's not, they're common, but I'd take the two common over the mob, if you have to. And one story, Jonathan, I don't know if you remember the circus story. It's another mob, so to speak. Well, I'm using that term loosely because the town meeting are respectable church people, but it's still a large group versus the lynching mob. Now, this so-called mob, which isn't a mob at all, but I'm calling that going to the circus, yeah. Sure. So, John, do you remember that story? Okay, anybody remember the story of the circus? Yes, Claire.
I know they had like, they purposely got someone drunk, or got a drunk guy to like, kind of make a fool of himself and like ride on a, what was it? It's like some animal.
A horse.
Yeah, and it was like really dangerous for him, but like everybody thought it was just hilarious.
Except,
Like Huck.
yeah, why was he worried? Why wasn't he laughing and enjoying?
Cause he thought he'd get hurt.
Yes? What does that tell you about Huck?
Has some kind of like emotions. to it.
Yes, but everybody else is laughing and, just enjoying the thing. Explain this to me. More than once when I was at another school, whenever a fight broke out, can you imagine such a thing in a school? 100 people, 200 people would be around it, watching it, enjoying it. Explain that. Why would 200 people enjoy? Of course, what happens sometimes, I'll never forget this, and Miss Page, ironically, that was her name, next door, there was a fight in the room, and teachers from other, and the principal came, she was right next door, so we ran out to her room. We couldn't get the door open because somebody purposely had pushed something in front of the door so that the fight could go on. I don't know how we got it or they got in, but can anybody explain that? Or maybe it's so obvious that it doesn't need an explanation. Why do we like fights? Why do we like automobile accidents? Layla?
I was just gonna say, like, I guess their town is so like dull and boring, and I guess like your school days, so uneventful that you just kind of like.
I know what you're saying. It's a break in the tedium of a school day. It's not the kind that you want, but yeah, I guess that. Why do we like automobile accidents? We always slow down to look, which could cause another accident, but it's just in human nature that we like violence, right? Basically, as long as it's done to somebody else. Well, you basically explained the circus, but again, another crowd that was laughing and laughing. Huck's different from that. And so, I'm gonna, if you'll turn to the back side of this, still have a couple other people. And we've talked about the sentimentalism of Emmeline, so we can, that's number 14. I showed you the pictures and we talked about the poem. So what's the relationship between sentimentalism and violence? John, maybe you could take this again. Would you do that? What's the connection between over emotions, seems like pretty obvious, and violence? And can you give examples of it in the book? What?
What do you mean by over?
Well, that's what sentimentality is. It's excessive emotions. It's like the difference between crying a little bit because something bad happened and you just can't control it. You're just over the top. Or you get so angry, nobody can calm you down, or that kind of thing. Can you think of examples in the book where emotions like that are shown to be, they lead to violence? But remember, I'll play the devil's advocate. Sherman's not emotional. He's like, listen, 1 o'clock, you're gone. You're out of here. He never seemed to be. But I think there is one emotion going on in him. What is it? Anybody can answer that. What motivates Sherburne to kill Boggs, when on the surface he's extremely calm and peaceful. Nobody messes with me. What am I expressing? Yeah, it's excessive pride. Anybody, Noah, where are you, Noah? Yeah, can you think of any other examples of where emotions lead to violence?
Well, like there was a fight that sparked in the last section.
Yeah.
Chapter.
The names?
It was like, it was when Sophia ran away.
Yeah.
And they went to go get the guns, and I can't remember what sparked the fight.
Well, when Sophia ran away, that's what sparked it. She was gonna marry one of the Shepherdsons. And they got really upset about it. And of course, naturally, what do you do when you get upset? You shoot somebody. That's what happened. You know, do you not realize how relevant this conversation is? I know you don't probably watch a lot of news, but we're going through a violent period in our country right now. In bigger cities, I hadn't heard too much of that here. But, you know, there's a lot of violence going on. Babies are getting shot, you know, because they're, you know, just happen to be in, somebody will just go by shooting into a crowd. So this is part of who we are, violence. And Sam, let me find one of these. Well, I'll just ask you, are we a violent country? Are we different from other countries? You know, we've always been independent. Not to get into the gun thing, but you know, we have had a history. We have a history of that. Does that make us more violent? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I feel like we have a lot more conflict than other countries, or not conflict, because like all these other countries have like civil wars going on, but like I think we're really opinionated, and we just we have a lot of pride in our opinions, and that creates violence. So I think yes, and
I don't know what y'all think about guns. I don't own one. I'm not opposed to it. I have a family member that does, more than one. And I've heard that you can't get ammunition these days. It's hard to find ammunition. But I don't know what you feel about gun control and all that. I just saw an article, and I couldn't help but watch it, about the United States Marine Corps. Has always, if you ever want to be a Marine, they've always stressed marksmanship. And in World War I, they were the best marksmen in the American Army, military. And they were sent to France in World War I, and they were 35 miles outside of Paris, and the German Army was moving toward Paris, and 2 regiments of the United States Marines were in front of them. And they started shooting the Germans at 800 yards with better weapons and better. The Germans had never seen marksmen like the Americans, and that they held off this attack on Paris because they simply were better trained and were better marksmen. That's kind of thing that makes me proud. I think we want military that can behave like that and shoot like that and have the weapons like that. The issue of you and me, or the bad guys having weapons in America shooting each other, that's where the problem is. I'm going to finish this with Ty. Can you think of good things? I think we may have said this before. It's questions 20 and 21. I'll make it easy. What good things happen? Does the river apply or supply for Jim and Huck? Like, what are the best things about the river? They're safer almost on the river than they are on the land. So what is it about the river that makes it a better place for them than the land?
I feel like they're able to like bond and become closer with each other, and it's just like the two of them.
Right.
Like there's no any other
That's a good point.
outside forces or anything that.
What else does the river provide for them?
Provides like safety. And
How safety? they are pretty safe on the water. I mean, he's an escaped slave. You know, no one's ever caught him if he got on the land, he'd be they'd find him and catch him. They can't do that. Think about what it provides for them in terms of just freedom. They're both escaping. What were you gonna say?
I was just gonna say just an overall sense of peace.
Yeah.
Because nature, it's just in its raw form is just beautiful.
Yeah, but not romantic. Nature doesn't have to be romantic. You don't have to be romantic to appreciate nature. What's the difference between a realistic view of nature and a romantic view of nature? What are you going to do if you're a romantic when you look at nature?
You're gonna glorify it.
Yes, you're going to exaggerate it. The romantic will just appreciate it as it is. Anyway, that's a great question. It's interesting. Why does Huck keep going to the land? It's question number 21. You know, he's safe on the river, but every time he goes to the land, like the king and the duke show up when he gets on the land. The Grangerfords and the Shepherds kill each other when on the land. Sherburne kills Boggs when he's on the land. The royal nonsuch happens when they get chased off. So none of that happens on the river, but why does Huck keep going back to the land? What does that tell you about human nature? Well, that's where people are, and we can't stay away from people too long. They just have the two of them, but that's all. So we need to be around people, and yet that's the part of the problem. Well, okay, you're going to read for Friday. Those are just some of the things I'm asking you to prepare for in future essay and so forth. So read for Friday. I don't think I've given this to you. Would you check and see if you have those poems by Walt Whitman? I don't think you do, but I'm just asking.
Someone's coming to county and I'm like, my mom's like right there. I mean, like it already looks actually my phone. Do you have like gray dress? I don't have this. Oh my gosh, I'll try reoccurring dreams. Today's my one day off work. What? Are you guys? Oh, I live like small boxes. He's like, and I'm like, Dale? And he's like, and he's like, what is it? And I was like, why are you asking? And then I see yes and and he's like, I am Robert. And then I start running. Thinks I'm dead. He thinks I'm dead. I try to put him in my car to drive to the hospital. So I fake he's dead. That's okay. I always want to run out. Right? Yeah.
There's like a biker
Okay.
that came.
We can use the sword. Just kidding. So I wait for him.
Make sure you don't have them. I don't have enough. I felt like I had plenty.
Because he was weird.
I'm gonna give out what I have and go run some more off.
And then I woke up and I had
I hear America singing. You don't have that?
What? No, I have like reoccurring dreams. I have it all my life too. So my dreams are very vivid.
I do have it. I found them.
And sometimes I'll dream stuff and then I'll like half of it, I'm not even. Yeah, it's small things. It's like small.
you know, running around. I would ride Roberts as soon as I went in, because I know him. But no, I don't.
Like, that's the name, like you remember specifically.
It's like engraved in my head.
Another thing, I had something recently where I was doing something and either it happened or something didn't happen.
All right, we don't have time for this, and you're reading for Friday, but I would like you to look at what I just gave you. We are going to do, there are 4 poems in here. You know, that one day this week we work together. We may do something like that tomorrow. But remember, Walt Whitman is the famous one. Emily Dickinson was the nominee. We did some Emily Dickinson. You might see, you need one? Yeah, you might see Emily Dickinson on the test, the AP test. Walt Whitman, he wrote poems that were too long to usually for us to analyze, but I'll show you these. Let me just read this first one to you. We can leave it 25 after. It's called I Hear America Singing, and to me, of all the poems we would do, this illustrates Whitman. It's free verse. It has listings in it. It has catalogs. Notice the title. It's got America. He loved to write about America. Let me read it to you, and maybe we have a minute to kind of see what is he getting at. I Hear America Singing. By Walt Whitman. I hear America singing the very carols I hear, those of mechanics, each one singing his as it should be, blithe and strong. The carpenter singing his as he measures his plank or beam. The mason singing his as he makes ready for work or leaves off work. The boatman singing what belongs to him in his boat. The deckhand singing on the steamboat deck. The shoemaker singing as he sits at the bench. The hatter singing as he stands. The woodcutter's song. The plowboy's on his way in the morning or at noon intermission or at sundown. The delicious singing of the mother or of the young wife at work or of the girl sewing or washing. Each singing what belongs to him or her and to none else. The day what belongs to the day. The night at night, the party of young fellows, robust, friendly, singing with open mouths their strong, melodious song. Again, 3 minutes before you look at it one more time and just see what you notice. I mentioned the listing. See if there's anything. Just to have a minute, look at it, mark it, just a minute. It wouldn't take long. Just mark the things that you can, we'll come back to it tomorrow. But